Okay, good morning, everybody. I was listening yesterday to Dennis Prager. He was discussing an article that he found where a woman was talking about how she regretted introducing the Santa Claus myth to her child. And Mr. Prager said that, even though there was no discussion of politics per se in this article, it was pretty obvious this woman was a leftist, right? And he said that every year he makes a show where he speaks about the importance of maintaining this mythology. I use the term mythology not in a negative term, but in a Jungian sense. And in a greater way, this whole question is illuminated by this, because it's not only that we're talking about this particular myth, but mythology in general, and the war between logos and mythos in society, not only today but over the past few centuries, when classically there was always a symbiotic relationship between logos and mythos. And it came up again, like this morning. As I was leaving for work, one of my kids was watching. They like to watch people play video games. They actually got to meet two of these people who make these YouTube channels at a convention. I wasn't able to make it, and my son was watching. My second son was watching a video, and it was something about like this mean teacher. It's a video game with a mean teacher, and she kidnapped Santa Claus and the whole thing. And my second daughter, said, "It doesn't matter. It's just a made up. He's just a made up guy. It doesn't matter." And I said, for us, it's not part of our culture, and it's not part of our religion, so it's not part of our mythos. But nonetheless, the archetype, first of all, it was based on an actual person, right, who lived in Turkey, whatever it was, 1700 years ago. Nicholas, who's revered as a saint by many Christians. I think by most Christians, even, because he's, even the Protestants appreciate the early church fathers to a certain extent, for the most part. Even if the Protestant ideology of saints, it differs from one to another, but it's someone who's respected. Just like I think TBN made a movie about Patrick. And again, even though that was it's an evangelical Protestant channel, but it was talking about a Catholic saint. In any event, that's neither here nor there. The truth is, though, that someone becomes elevated to an archetypical post when they become venerated popularly in society, whether in the classical religious sense or in the other senses of how our culture works, meaning in a similar way, a figure like George Washington is elevated to a archetypical stance and a mythological one. Even in modern times, even contemporary people, even things that go on now, the mythos that exists around people and the veneration that exists around people, around celebrities and so forth. And the point that I was bringing out is that, and I mentioned to my daughter, is even though it's not ours and it's not our mantle to take on, there is an aspect of mental health that is gained by having this archetype, and society has grown and advanced by virtue of the psychology of religion. I was listening yesterday to a professor was talking about Jung's famous work, The Psychology of Religion, and this professor said that human beings were domesticated by invisible gods, so to speak, meaning that the psychological growth of religion and the psychological importance of religion and of mythos and of these ideas, it's part of what makes us as a society functional. And when you take that out, when you rip that out from society, that vacuum does not remain empty. And so the reason why someone would want to rip that out is because they want to replace that archetype, meaning Santa Claus is replaced with Stalin. If you create that vacuum, nature abhors a vacuum. And Santa Claus is a much better archetype than Stalin or Hitler or Xi or Pol Pot or whoever it is that wants to be that archetype, that wants to be that that person that fills that vacuum. So that's the issue, that it's important. Again, just because something is not part of our mythology, not part of our tradition, and we don't need a Santa Claus in the Jewish world. It doesn't need to be Hanukkah Harry either. We don't need that ourselves. But and it goes back to something else. When the people are discussing about this question of did Christianity merely copy pagan ideas, and so is Santa Claus Odin and so forth, and and while there is parallels with Norse mythology and with other mythological ideas to the modern day myths and the Christian myths and so forth, it doesn't necessarily mean that they stole them. It means that those archetypes, while they might not necessarily be universal necessarily, they are much wider than the cultures that express them in one way or another way. And even though, yes, historically there is that connection, but beyond that there is something metaphysically that's important to understand, or psychologically that's important to understand when it comes to these questions. And so much of extremism, both on the right and the left, are due to the blurring of the lines between mythos and logos, or the rejection, particularly the rejection of mythos in favor of logos, which we've discussed before and is worthwhile to discuss again. But I'm at work and it's time for me to go. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment.